Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
I'm going to mess with people's minds and be like, I'm not well. I'm not well. But what about you? And see,
How's it going? How about you? Welcome to the Curious Folks podcast for those challenging the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
and I'm Jacqueline Misla. And on today's episode, Effy and I are going to answer your questions. We received so many questions for the first episode that we had to schedule a round 2. I love these episodes because I love deep diving into people's questions. But do you know what question I hate? I hate the question, how are you doing? Yeah, because first of all, oftentimes people aren't really asking you how you're doing. They're just like, how are you? And you're like, good. How are you? Good. And then that's it. It's over then. But like nowadays, we know like people are not good. We know that we're not good. We know other people are not good. So it feels like a strange formality. Like the other day, literally, I had a phone call with my therapist and, you know, she picked up and she was like, hey, how are you? I'm like, I'm good. How are you? She's like, I'm good. And, you know, we chatted for a second and she's like, so, you know, why are we talking today? I was like, oh, because, yeah, no, I'm not good. I am not okay. I'm not doing okay. But it was just funny that I'm like, how are you? I'm good. I'm so good. Oh, no, I'm not good. I was just saying.
No,
that's just the thing that I say. Yeah. So I don't like when someone is like, no, really, how are you? First of all, I'm live in my head. So it's like takes me a minute to be like, how am I? Like first thing in the morning, if I woke up, like the first text that I get when I wake up from my partner is like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I don't know. Because I just woke up.
Sleepy?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I don't know. Give me a little bit. But I don't know how to really answer that question except to be like, it's complicated. Like I'm good and healthy and grateful and joyful in many ways. And also am struggling.
Yeah.
So let's not ask each other that question. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, I have to tell you, so in the UK, we don't ask that question. It's not. I feel like it's an American formality / small talk / social graces thing to sort of say hello, how are you? Like this one after another hello, how are you? With this question hanging up in the air with no real expectation for connection or a real answer I think it's almost like a verbal tick. I think it's like a social verbal tick.
It's true.
Than an actual.
That's true. You're 100% right.
Like bid for connection. And I think I do find it. I mean, I've gotten used to it because I've been living here for 10 years. But when I do that, when I go back to the UK and I do that, people are kind of like, why are you asking that? Like,
so what do you do?
I don't ask it.
No, but what do people say when they see each other? They're just like, hello. And then that's it.
Hi, good to see you. Hi, good to see you. Oh my God, last time I saw you was.
Oh, but then you have to talk more to each other.
But I think this is what I mean. It's like this like social. I feel like it's like a social, almost like a social tick or a space filler.
But let's say you're in a building, or is it an apartment, a flat in the UK?
A flat, yeah.
And you are running into someone in the lobby. You're not interested in a long conversation. You're just like social greeting.
Yeah.
Like, what does that exchange sound like?
Yeah, and I think if people do ask, how are you doing? I think it's a genuine question rather than this like, what's the word? Like a scripted, social touch
what
point.
Could we replace our social tick with? Just like, hello, hope you have a good day. Like,
yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's also like, it's probably somewhere. I think the closest that comes to that in the UK, actually, I do say, how do you do? Which is just an old thing that I've been saying for a long time, and it's more like a.
Do you like tip your hat, like, or gesture? Like, how do you do?
I do say how do you do, but I feel like how do you do is a different question than how are you. I feel like how do you do is more of a generic question, like I don't know, maybe it's just semantics, but I do feel like how do you do is more like a out in the world in general, like in big terms, whereas how are you, it feels very personal. And I struggled in the beginning because people would say how are you and then walk away. Like people say how are you to you in like Sephora, you know what I mean? And you're like what are you expecting me to answer? Like we don't know each other.
Yes.
So I understand, like over time I understood it's just like a social grace and it doesn't really mean anything. So I just like nod and like smile and walk away. I think in the UK when people say how are you, they mean it. Like it's not like a random person that you just meet on the street who doesn't know you is very unlikely to say how are you.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
I think they're likely to maybe bid you a good day. They'll say, oh, so good to see you. Like the question that you just asked. Like you bumped into somebody in the lobby of a we don't really have lobbies for flats in the UK. We just have different structures. Okay. But let's say we bumped into somebody in the town the town square and it's like, oh, good to see you. And I think you just like have a great day, and it's less about this kind of like, you know, I think people are maybe share more immediately because you know each other. But yeah, I mean, so going back to what you're saying, how are you is a bit of a redundant question.
I think I'm going to answer like, oh, I'm not good. I'm not good though. How are you? Yeah. Like just the same like positive tone and just see what people if someone reacts differently.
Well, let me ask you the question. What would you like to, well, how would you, if you could have whatever you wanted, how would you like that interaction to go?
I don't know. See, this is, I'm struggling because I like to get straight to the chase. The other day, you and I and one of our collaborators, Leah, logged into Zoom and she logged in and she's like, hey. And I was like, hey, okay. So if you look at the document, you go to the second paragraph and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Hi, how are you? Have a good day. Oh, look at the light and the plants in your, like that piece comes secondary to me. I'm like, let's skip the small talk, get straight to the work. So I'd rather do none of those things. I'd rather wake up in the morning and be like, okay, so you got to do this. Let's do that. But I remember that other people are like, hey, how are you? How are you? And I do that.
What about casual interactions that you're not doing anything with people?
Yeah.
That you're not.
I would like smile and nod, maybe, and not say anything.
Right. Yeah.
I'm an introvert in hiding. People think that I'm extroverted, but
ditto. You and me, lady.
Like I love humanity, but don't necessarily love humans. That's I stole that from Glennon Doyle, but it's true. So I think I would just like smile and nod and be like, hello.
Nice.
Yes, I would like do like I'm doing the like fake hat in the air gesture. I don't know what that is, but I would either do some sort of gesture or just nod or smile or just say hello. But people who care about me, it's the first text that I get in the morning is like, good morning, how are you? And I don't know. It's too early for me to know how I am. And sometimes it's not good.
Yeah. I think the other thing that I've noticed with some people that I like, which is the thing that I also coach around for various areas of like love, sex, and relationships, which is to share first and then ask. So you kind of share the information. Because the other thing with how are you is that when somebody says, how are you? In order to give at least you'd have to gauge the capacity that they have on the other side to receive the answer. Right.
How much do you really want to know right now?
And like the wonderful woman at Sephora who's asking is not ready for me to actually like answer the question honestly and like why would I? Right? You know, poor lady who just wants to sell me lipstick, which, you know, I appreciate. Like that person doesn't have the capacity, nor do I expect that person to have the capacity to have a full answer to that question. But then, like, I don't know, when you ask me how I am, or when I ask you how you are, I'm ready, and you know, and I have the capacity to hear the answer.
Yeah.
So I think maybe to kind of let the other person know where you're at might actually be is like sharing what you want to and like sharing how you are in the context of whatever you want, a conversation you want, and then ask how about you. Yeah. So like first thing in the morning, I woke up this morning, I feel really rested. I don't know what happened last night. Maybe I found like the coziest part of my bed. And I woke up and I'm all chirpy. How are you? Right? Right. Then you're like, okay, we're talking about like, how are you in the context of like, how is my morning? Like, how did I sleep at night? You know what I mean?
Right.
So maybe I think it's like ignoring the how are yous that don't really mean anything. That kind of is like, hello, how are you? That run together. That
social tick. I like that.
Social tick. And then I think in the other ways, just to ask people or maybe role model of like share first and be like, how about you?
I'm either going to skip it altogether. I'm not going to stop asking people how they're doing. Or I'm gonna mess with people's minds and be like, I'm not well. I'm not well. But what about you? And see,
how about you?
I'm alive. I mean, I've eaten today. I've slept, and but apart from that, I can't answer. And then see what people say.
Yeah. I hear you.
So if you see me on the street or in a cafe, don't ask me how I.
Noted. Now I'm like, I'm gonna put a post-it on, because like you and I speak every day.
But what's funny is, and I don't know if you realize this, that when we speak, we'll log in and be like, "Hey, how are you? Good. How are you?" And we're like, "Okay. So how are you doing?"
Right.
Like we ask each other twice. The first time is just like the social tick, and then we're like really paying attention to like, "Oh, how are you?"
Right. I do think it's a verbal tick. I think it's a verbal tick. I can definitely work on eliminating it, because I think it's like also like wasted time.
I know.
Because it's empty. Like it's not a real connection. True. It's just a tick.
Yeah.
So I feel like those 10 seconds, 20 seconds add up over the course of your life.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's like that app Acorn, where you like you save your change as an investment. I'm gonna start saving those times, and over time, over the course of my life, I will have saved the days.
I gotta replace it with something. So I'm gonna think about that. I will report back. But that was like my highlight for the week, when I was like, I'm good. And she's like, "So why are we talking?" And I was like, "Oh, because I'm not good." No, I'm not okay. That question, I don't like that question. But what I do love is listener questions.
I do. I was going to say, about those questions. Now we're getting down and dirty with it.
Listener questions. And so let me first thank you to everyone who submitted questions via email, sent us voice memos, or left voice messages. I love going through the questions. They're always really fun and interesting to sort through them. And we get to hear from folks around the country, around the world. And so we just had an abundance of questions last time. So we thought, let's do round 2.
Let's do more. And feel free to send us more, because I think we like doing these, and we'll do those every few weeks or so.
Yeah.
Let's start with a voice message that we received on our podcast hotline.
Hello, Curious Foxes. Thank you for the opportunity to offer a question for your podcast. There's something that's going to be happening in my life. Not exactly sure the timing, but I have a girlfriend who we've been together. It'll be 3 years in March, and we met in kind of an open style relationship. It has since kind of grown a little bit more closed. We have some agreements around doing group play together, and some other things that are non-monogamous and non-conforming. But my question today is, she lives with her 2 children. I live mainly by myself, but I'm a divorced dad, so I have my kids every other weekend and other times during the week for dinners. And we are planning to move in together, me move into her place. So there's definitely a lot of discussions that we're having together. And we're trying to figure out the timing of when that would be. The pandemic is definitely making that a little bit more challenging, just because she's doing homeschooling and she works from home, and I actually work from home. So there's been a lot of time spent in that home together during the pandemic. What I'd like to hear from you, because I always learn from your discussions, is what are some of the things that we should be talking about, thinking about? I am ready, absolutely, to make this transition, and I've given it a lot of thought, but I'm also just wondering, from you all, what things I should think about in this situation. I will be the one moving from my 1-bedroom apartment into her house. So, thanks. Bye-bye.
So this question really resonates, actually, because I've combined families in the midst of quarantine. So I have my daughter who's with me part the time, and then I live with my wife, and then separately I live with my partner. And then over quarantine, we were all together at some point. So that resonates. But then also because my daughter was in a similar situation, at some point her father moved in with an ex-partner of his who also had a daughter. And so there was like a blending of households that happened there, and I got to observe kind of that experience. And so there are 2 suggestions that I would make. One is to think about the logistics, and the other is the emotional aspect of this blending that's happening. In terms of logistics, and the two connect really with each other, which is why I'm going to start with logistics, because not knowing where to put your stuff creates like emotional unrest.
For sure.
And so let's talk about the stuff and the logistics first. Where will everyone sleep? Where's everyone to work? Where's everyone going to go to virtual school? Where's everyone going to hang out? Where's everyone going to brush their teeth? Like just even kind of walking around the space with the eyes of each member of kind of the family and the kids who are going to be coming for dinners or over the weekend of your children, and saying, is there a space for them that feels like their space? Again, where can I work and this person go to virtual school and not over here, that person who's on a conference call, all of that.
I just want to add something in there, something that I've noticed. Like, I feel like, and I felt this, when I was a kid, I was the same. I feel like your bedroom is your haven. And I think knowing where your bedroom is, like your space, is really important for kids. And I think figuring out like where is the primary bedroom? Because I think you had a similar thing with your daughter where you, when you're moving in with your partner in a new apartment, you were like, and you can have a room. And she's like, not ready to have a room.
Yeah.
In that house yet. So I think like really thinking about space and asking like, where's going to be your primary bedroom? Have that space organized. I think that's super important.
Well, there's two things there, right? So there is your girlfriend's children who live in that home, and children can be territorial with their stuff, with their toys, with their space, with their right. So how do they feel about now this other person, this man, these children who they may have a great relationship with, but now they're going to be in their space.
It makes a huge difference.
So how are they going to feel? And then how do your children feel? What can you do to limit them feeling like they're a guest in this space, and instead feel like this is my space as well, that this is my bed, this is where my book bag is, this is where my toys are, and that when I am not here, when I'm at mom's house, someone else isn't rifling through my stuff or messing with my bed. Like I can have that sense of trust that is my space and that feels sacred. So kind of walking through the house in that way and saying, where can everyone feel like this also belongs to them? And part of that, as I was sharing, I think also relates to routines. Things like when people are waking up and showering and breakfasting and dinnering and all those things, because you're combining now two different households worth of routines and thinking through the flow of those things, I think is going to be really important.
Yeah. And I also think that like there's no ages of these children. And I can imagine if the children are at a different age, they all have different routines, different starting points in the day, different like end points in the day. Yeah. Sounds like chaos in the making.
So if you do, so if we're talking about logistics, where's everyone sleeping, working, going to school? The emotional aspect of that is how do your children feel like that's their home and not like a guest? And how do the children who currently live there manage, how are you managing their, the territorialism? With logistically managing routines and in thinking about the impact of that, the emotional piece of that is, do you consider yourselves to be now one family or are you two families that are living together? So is the goal for everyone to be on the same page, or are you maintaining kind of these two distinct routines and ways of being? This came up, I remember, with my daughter because her dad and his girlfriend had very different parenting styles, which also included like they were allowed different snacks. So for example, for breakfast, he'd make sure that our daughter had oatmeal or eggs or something. And his girlfriend's daughter was allowed to have sugary cereal for breakfast. And that was different stylistic parenting preferences. But now you have these two girls sitting next to each other at the breakfast table. And my daughter's looking over at the sugary cereal and saying, I want some of that. And he's like, no, we don't do that. And so that just created tension amongst the grownups and amongst the kids. And so thinking through those kinds of things, I think is something to consider.
So what I'm hearing is like, are you going to operate as a single unit, or are you operating as two families that are somehow gracefully dancing around each other?
Right.
Which will be the other alternative.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. For sure.
And just even answering within that space, like, what's your role? Are you going to be a co-parent to your partner's children when you're there? Are you kind of there and emotionally supporting her, but actually not acting like a co-parent? How does that impact your kids? So, those kinds of questions I think are important to explore. And then the other thing that comes up for me is you right now, I imagine, have a lot of time for yourself, being on your own, living on your own, and then having your children part-time. And now you're going to be surrounded by people all the time. And so how do you continue to carve out time for yourself and carve out time time for your people, your community, your friends, your hobbies, your
right. Yeah, those are parts are really important, because I think that's when we lose touch with our community or whatever that might look like, friends, family, passions, that's when sort of the enmeshment starts. So it's really important to figure out, schedule in, and make room for all those things in your life too, as you sort of transition into this like co-living situation with all the families blending. It's very easy to forget those things. And I know you were sharing the other day, it's like everybody gets time off except me. Yeah.
Because when I'm either at one partner's house or the other.
Right.
So when I'm not there, they're on their own. Right. Except for my daughter, who's still too young to be all by herself. I'm the only grown up in every day. When she's not with her dad, he's alone. I'm the only grown up in this like family that is never alone. I got to work that out.
Yeah, schedule that in. It's just Jackie time, you know.
Yes.
Schedule that in for sure. Yeah, and since you're starting something from scratch, dear listeners who submitted a question, schedule it in right up front. You're going to miss that alone time.
Yeah,
you
true.
may or may not realize this right now, but we can guarantee you suddenly you're going to be like, whoa, where's all this time that I had?
Speaking from the future. Book your alone time now.
Now, save yourself. Those are amazing tips. And it's amazing you've done all this. So it's like.
And I think the last thing I would say is, have either a family meeting or meeting of the families. So, potentially first in your separate units. So you sit down with your children, your partner sit down with her children, and then combined, you can talk through concerns and talk through what people are excited about. I think talking about the benefits is as important as discussing any concerns or logistics. And so kind of having that balanced conversation, and then maybe doing things together.
Yeah.
Outside of the moving process.
Yeah. I think, so the kids parts are hard, right? Because all the, people are different, kids are different. You need to kind of get to know your kid, and you need to understand. I'm sure you do, but both parents, you and your partner, need to sort of figure out what are the best conditions for these kids to spend time together, right? Are you doing a family day out as a one big family, and you're sort of having, you're going to an amusement park and spending like a day with like fun and games and play, and everyone's kind of like running around doing their own thing, and and there's some neuro hacks you can throw in there. For example, we know that humans bond around like fear and joy and like big emotional feelings. So like putting the kids in a roller coaster together, sending them through a haunted house,
that's great.
Taking them on a tough hike. Like those are the things that will kind of get them to focus on each other, on like get them into an emotional state, more ready for bonding. So you can throw in some like military style neuro hacks to get the kids to bond with one another. But or what are your kids like? Or is it going to be more like slow intro where each partner meets the kids solo over dinner, and adults and the kids get to know each other, and then the kids meet over time? Like you need to only really the parents know what will be the right interaction. But I think it's important to think through that and be creative and resourceful around it. So those are some of the things I would sort of put in there for getting the kids to know each other. And also just for your relationship, I think when you have sort of this many kids and this many schedules, and currently everyone's homeschooling and there's also careers involved, it can just be very easy to slip into a utilitarian situation, especially when you're moving, right?
Yes.
When things are starting with moving into a space, it's all about logistics. It's all about who's doing what, when, scheduling. And I think it's important to make sure that you make room for joy and play within your relationship that isn't necessarily just about the kids.
Yes.
So scheduling date night, like figuring out childcare for all the kids, can one of the grandmas can do it? Can you chip in for, go house or do a babysitter or whatever it is, and make sure that you have some kid free time, and then you're spending time on your own relationship and making time for date night and connection and intimacy and sex and what all the fun, juicy, lovely parts of a relationship.
Yeah, it's true. The logistics can bog us down, and taking care of the kids and making sure they're well. All of those things are incredibly important. Yeah. And making sure that the foundation of the partnership feels like it's thriving.
Right.
So during the move process, it might be stressful, and you're going to have to kind of dig into the reserves, if you will, and go on autopilot in some things, then make sure that you are creating time to replenish those reserves, to replenish the energy and the dynamic, both with you all alone, that your partner has time alone, that you have time alone, and that you have time together.
Yeah. I love that they already are, they've got non-monogamy and sort of non-conforming ideas already in there, which I find makes people more practical thinkers, creative thinkers, and kind of more emotionally flexible, because if they're already managing non-monogamy, there's also like maybe some practice in scheduling and some practice in managing like lots of emotional states and managing lots of people in different places, emotionally and physically. So I think those skills actually will come handy.
Yeah, it's true. Because I mean, honestly, this could be any heterosexual monogamous couple talking about a blending of their relationships and of their families. I think what is, the added bonus, if you will, if you're in an open relationship or a polyamorous relationship, as you noted, there's additional skill sets that you've likely learned through that process that you can leverage around emotional regulation and around fear or judgment or jealousy or autonomy or scheduling and all those things. So to your point, I think you guys are on the right track so far. I think just, stay connected with each other, get help, get community, check in with other people who are going through this. You don't feel like you're on an island of your own.
Yeah. And call back and give us an update. I would love to hear where you're at. Have you moved in? How are the kids doing? This is really interesting. And I think this is one of those places where I think non-monogamy can be compartmentalized as this one thing that people do. I think non-monogamy structure offers a lot of support for many, many situations. And this is one of those situations. So we'd love to hear an update. Send us an update.
Yay. So our second question came to us via our inbox. And so the person writes, I'm curious about your views on polyamory or open relationships from a demi or asexual point of view. Like how to manage them. And then it's a 2-part question. So the first part is, how do you manage demi asexual people within an open relationship? And the second is, how do long-term relationship that was once monogamous deal with partners having sex with other people in a recently opened relationship?
Good questions.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly start with explaining what demisexual and asexual are, because these are kind of terminology maybe not everyone's familiar with. So I actually want to add in there aromantic as well. So let's just put them all together and explain to people what it is. So asexual, let's start with asexual, is somebody who does not have sexual attraction under any circumstances. So asexual, absence of sexuality, essentially. They're people who may be open to friendship, even intimacy, connection. They're just not sexually attractive to anyone under any circumstances. That's your asexual. Then you have demisexual. People who identify as demisexual find themselves sexually attracted to people who they have an emotional and or intellectual connection with. So they are people who would not necessarily feel sexually attracted to somebody just from their physical, just physically, just because they're physically attracted. They need that sort of emotional or intellectual connection. So those are demisexual people. And aromantic is kind of an extension of asexual, where it's the absence of romantic feelings. So there are people who feel that they thrive in predominantly platonic relationships, and they just don't feel like they don't have a romantic attraction to anybody in their lives under any circumstance.
Yeah. I've been thinking actually about the question around asexuality and demisexuality a lot, because my relationship with my wife has evolved over the years to one that is more asexual. I don't certainly consider myself to be asexual, and I don't know actually if she would consider herself to be asexual, but our relationship at the moment is asexual. Our relationship began as more demisexual. Like our attraction for each other was fueled by our emotional connection, our intellectual connection. And then over the last almost decade of us being together, it's evolved into affectionate and loving, but not sexual. And for some time, I thought that I had to manage this relationship differently. I like to either bring sexuality back into it, or somehow there was like inequity because I was having sex in my other relationship. And frankly, I think that was just all rooted in my thoughts around what a relationship should or should not evolve or involve. And so once I stopped shooting all over the place, I just settled into like what felt right and it created less stress. And so let me say, I do feel grateful to be in an open relationship because I think that the lack of sexuality in my marriage would be a concern. But because I can express myself sexually in my other partnership, it doesn't feel like pressure in my marriage. And we can really just settle into having this kind of new dynamic together that works for both of us.
And I think that is exactly the reason why asexual, demisexual folk tend towards non-monogamy, because this kind of open structure allows them to form relationships with people who can then have their sexual needs met elsewhere if that's a thing, right? So there is a big cross-section of people who identify as demisexual or asexual and people who identify themselves as polyamorous. These people by nature tend more towards polyamory because I should say more towards polyamory than open relationships, as the former tends to be more about the relating side of things, where the latter, the open relationships, tend more towards sexual exploration. So if you are asexual or demisexual, there's more relationships in the polyamory side of things, and not necessarily so much on the sexual exploration side of things.
Just to note, I am not a fan of labels, right? So we've had conversations about this before in soapboxes, like all of the names and the labels, and I understand the value of them. And that being said, I do think that there is value in having dialogue with a potential partner or a partner around, do they consider themselves open versus poly? For example, because you referenced that specifically, because my wife did consider herself to be polyamorous and demisexual. She didn't have that language when we first were talking about it. We're like, you're open, I'm open, yeah. And I'm highly sexual and considered myself at the time to be open. So when we both opened our marriage, we're like, yeah, we're both on the same page. And then she's like, I'm madly in love with this person. And I'm like, wait, what? I thought we were just gonna like hook up with people or go on, have French style affairs that last the summer. And that was not, she wanted deep emotional connection and multiple loving relationships. And that is not what I was interested in. And that evolved for me over time, but that came as a surprise. And so while I don't love labels, I do think that there's value in getting on the same page around what we mean when we are talking about being in a non-monogamous relationship.
For sure. I think with all these labels, as I say, labels will get you on the same page with someone. You need to have a conversation to get onto the same paragraph. It is important. If someone is talking to you and they're telling you that they identify as asexual, demisexual, polyamorous, open relationship, those are great. They're like signs. They're like chapter headings. And then you're like, great. There's so many good, juicy, exciting conversations to be had there. Like, I think especially if you find yourself assuming a bunch of things, it's like pause, switch on that curiosity and be like, wow, that's so exciting, tell me more. Like that is the right response, not like, oh great, me too, right? Like if you're like, great, me too, like that's your cue to be like, pause, right, that's so exciting, tell me more, right? And when they're done, that's amazing, let me tell you about myself, right? There is that space that needs to be filled with some conversation. So again, like we love giving rules of thumb to people. Again, if you hear somebody say something like, I'm in an open relationship, and you're like, yeah, me too, that is your cue to be like, oh, tell me more, and then listen, right? So, and we'll dive into this more because we actually do want to do an episode on asexuality and demisexuality and aromanticism. Is that a thing? And sort of dig into it more. So let's talk about how to manage folks who are vocally identifying themselves as demisexual or asexual. I actually do think that when this person's asking how to manage them, I think to me it's a little ambiguous. It's like, is it how to manage the relationship or the people? But let's just assume they mean the relationship. With asexual folks, you need to imagine the relationship with lots of connection and no sex, essentially. You're best off getting your cues from the asexual person in your life and ask them what it means for them. What does asexuality mean for them? And what, if at all, intimacy and connection looks like for them, and see if it works for you too.
Yes.
So again, asexuality is a label. Find out what it means for them. Find out their broader experience, their broader context. Why does that work for them? Is it just an instinct? They just don't have a sexual attraction. There's more to it than that. So, get stuck in, get to know the person.
My wife asked me the other day, she was like, I would like to snuggle more. How do you feel about that? So I think that's a great example of what you're sharing. Is there is now no more assumptions around what feels good for either of us. And so we check in with each other and say, I would like to cuddle. How do you feel about that? Now, with my partner who do have a sexual relationship, we'll say like, what kind of mood are you in today? Are you in a cozy mood? Are you in a cuddly mood? Because sex is on the table. So it's like, are you in a sexy space or not? I think with my wife, the kind of sexy space feels off the table for now, both for us comfortably off the table, but it's like within the not sexy space, within the affection space. Right. How are we feeling and what do we want?
Right. I love that. Exactly. And you're going to get your cue from one another. Like there's no like rule. Again, label gives you a clue and then you sort of say, tell me more. Similarly with demisexual folks, it's about figuring out what they need to feel intellectually and emotionally connected enough to unlock their sexual desires. Again, only they know the answer, and then only you will know the answer to whether that works for you or not. Yeah. Right. So if it is about lots of, hand holding and conversations, walking down the beach, and you're like, I don't really love conversation. I kind of want to just get down to it. It might not work for you, So all this is to say, if you're interested in an open structure because you want to predominantly explore sexually, or even that sex is an important component of a romantic relationship for you, those who identify as demisexual or asexual might not be right people for you to date. So it's just worth saying, like, you need to align with people that work for you and vice versa. So if you're really looking at sexual exploration and adventure, good for you. We celebrate you. You might not find what you're looking for with people who identify this way.
Yeah. And if you have an asexual partnership, that's a valid and beautiful partnership where you can thrive. Yeah. So it's like a choose your own adventure. Yeah. Figure out what works for you, what you need right now. Understand that'll evolve. Right. Because this wasn't always how our relationship was and may continue to evolve over the course of our lifetime, and stay present with yourself, with the other person. I also want to get to the second part of their question, which is, that they're in a long-term relationship that was once monogamous, and how do they deal with their partner now having sex with other people for the first time as they just opened up? Well, let me say this is a common issue after opening up for the first time. This makes sense. And I think personally, my short answer is just slowly and awkwardly. Yeah. Like, you've had certainly much more experience coaching people through this process. That is exactly what you do. And so I can speak a little bit from some of my coaching work, but primarily from my personal experience. It's not necessarily comfortable in the beginning. It's going to feel weird. It's going to feel a little painful. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable. You're going to figure each other out. What do you want to know? What don't you want to know? How do you distract yourself? Do you not want to be distracted and you want to sit in the discomfort? Like, slowly and awkwardly is the way that you deal with it. Yeah.
And persistently, and it changes over time, and and I have to say, people deal with it differently because different people put different weights on sex. Yes. Right. So for some people, going for a walk around the park seems a lot harder to digest than their partner going to a sex party with somebody else. Yes. I'm one of those people. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So for some people, they're like, oh, you're just having sex, whatever. I am one of those people. Like, I'm like, sex is fun, and it's a fun activity. And I think it bothers me less if my partners are having sex with other people. And I think for you, it's the other way around, right? You're like...
No, sex actually doesn't bother me as much. It's the, like, if you're cuddling afterwards and stroking each other's hair and looking to each other's eyes and, like, talking about your childhood. Now I'm starting to get a little tweaked. Now I can feel my stuff was tightening up in my body, and
I think same. I think same then. Yeah, for sure. Like, sex doesn't bother me as much, but I do work with people on both sides of the spectrum. People who are just like, sex is blah, and other people are like, oh, sex, they're having sex with other people. I think I love your answer of slowly and awkwardly. I think it is, and it's for what I coach people on is that see it as an opportunity for growth and exploration. exploration. It's really all in your head. So it's up to you how you are going to feel about it. It's going to take a lot of unpacking, a lot of practice. And the thing I think makes the biggest difference, though it is not like a magic spell, is to get very clear about why you're tolerating this discomfort. Meaning, why are you creating by having an open relationship? What does it afford you that you are tolerating that particular discomfort and feeling in that moment?
Yes.
I think that what gets people through.
Yes.
Like, is it that momentary discomfort? Can you get to a place of like, this is a momentary discomfort and I'm tolerating it because my new open relationship structure affords me, and this is the part that's different for everyone. Like, this is the fill in the blanks that I work with people. It affords me variety, affords me comfort, safety, security, fun. It affords me a better connection with my partner. It affords me time, like a bajillion things that only you have the answer for. And once you get clear about that, then that is what gets you through those momentary discomforts.
Yes. That makes sense. And let me also say, speaking as someone who's been through this and has tried to like dissect my own experience, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know how to deal with my partner having sex or them knowing that I'm having sex with other people, I don't know if there's a situation, at least for me, where I didn't feel uncomfortable. So my partner Alexis often says like #team never satisfied. So when my wife was sleeping with somebody else, that made me uncomfortable. But when she wasn't sleeping with someone else and I felt bad, and that made me uncomfortable. And when I started to sleep with someone else and my wife was like, just be safe, and didn't seem to care or be jealous at all, that made me uncomfortable. And then when I started to like flirt with other people and my partner was like, I hope you're not going to be doing anything with anyone else, that made me uncomfortable. And so like there's like no scenario.
I was going to say, and why are you having sex with other people?
But this is my point, is like, I don't know if there's a scenario where I was like, oh, this feels like the sweet spot. This feels great. When they weren't jealous at all, felt uncomfortable. When they felt jealous, felt uncomfortable. When they were having lots of sex, felt uncomfortable. When I was having sex, but they weren't, that felt uncomfortable. And so my point is, it's just may be uncomfortable. And like, you just have to be like, this feels like, sit in it, learn from it, talk about it, that there may not be a sweet spot. And frankly, if you find a place of comfort, I liken it to being hungry versus being fed. It is momentary. I am hungry, then I will eat, and then I'm not hungry anymore until you're hungry again. And so it may not be, there are definitely times where I have compersion and I feel really joyful that my partner is joyful with somebody else. And then 2 days later, depending on what's happening for me, if I'm menstruating, if I had a bad day at work, if I'm tired, if I need connection or whatever, now I'm really uncomfortable with the amount of time she's spending with somebody else. So there's no plateau in my mind and to which I'm reaching. It's kind of like trying to find daily synergy.
Yes.
And
management. You manage it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's not a problem that you solve. It's a problem that you manage,
Exactly.
basically.
Exactly.
I think that's very, very wise words. And I think it's also very fickle, like you said.
Yes.
How you're feeling is going to make a lot of difference. So I think if you're at a stage at the beginning of a relationship and you're like, how do I manage this? Really uncomfortable. See what is it that you can have in your life that makes it feel fulfilled and enriched. It doesn't have to be somebody else. Like, what we're not aiming for is, we're not looking for symmetry, we're looking for synergy.
Yes.
So as long as you're feeling satisfied and fulfilled and alive in other ways, then that will help you. But I completely agree with Jackie. It's just going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Until it's not. Yeah, and then it's going to be uncomfortable again.
Exactly. And the discomfort is trying to tell you something. Right. It's either telling you, maybe I need more connection. My tank does not feel full in my partnership right now. And I'm feeling jealous because I want more connection with them. Or maybe I'm feeling jealous because they went to a nice restaurant and I want to go to a restaurant and it has nothing to do with them. Or maybe like it is trying to tell you something, that discomfort. And so sit with it and listen for it. And again, go back to reach out to other people. What you're describing, I don't want to say that it's common in order to invalidate it, because it is very real for me, for you. And it is common, and so that we can commiserate with others and get support from others.
Right.
And
that you can find camaraderie and knowing that you're not alone in having these feelings. And most people who are transitioning struggle with these questions. So you're among friends. You're among friends.
You are. Same. Would love an update. If all the folks who've called and left questions, would love to hear how things are going. Our third question comes to us by way of voice memo.
I have lots of feelings around finances, money, being enough, and desiring intimate partnerships, specifically romantic ones. Currently, I'm not dating, but I've realized that I often equate earning a lot of money, in quotes, as a metric for deciding when I am ready or open to date. There's no salary that I have in my head that feels like, okay, this is enough, this makes me feel comfortable, I can provide and support someone else. But I do know that I am very hard on myself when it comes to being able to show up and support the folks in my life. My question is, how do you reconcile feelings of being enough, feelings of potentially earning less than your partner, feelings of not really being in the place that you want to be yet, and potentially blocking yourself from desiring or having these deep-seated, intimate, vulnerable connections? What do you tell yourself, or how do you work through some of those emotions and blocks to allow you to move through a less pressure-filled life? I know there's a lot of underlying feelings of, okay, if I'm not making X amount of money, then I can't show up for anyone else. If I can't show up for myself, and if I can't show up for myself, rather, I can't show up for anyone else.
Super interesting question. And
I love this question.
Yeah. And I think for me, what immediately, I felt that in my body. It was like, ooh, I felt that way. And I think what it triggered for me was my own reminder to myself that we have value outside of how much we make. We have value outside of what we do for a living. And frankly, we have value of our being more than our doing, which is hard for me sometimes to accept, that me simply being is enough. And so that's the first thing to name, is that you are worth more in partnership than what your job is or how much you are earning. I also think the other thing that's important to remember is that some of us are driven always and point towards growth and never feel satisfied. So I want to, have a bigger house, more money in the bank, more stability, a deeper career trajectory, and understanding if that resonates with you, that types of growth and moving target is important. It's going to help you define whether or not your concern right now is, I need to be financially stable in order to feel like I am thriving in myself in order to have partnership? Or is there some goalpost that you're going to continue to chase? I just need $10,000 more in the bank. I just need a little bit bigger of an apartment. I just need a little bit better of a title. So that's something just to ask yourself. Is it about safety and stability that you're seeking? Or is there this you just want your ducks in a row, but those ducks will never really, they're never going to get in order.
They're awry. The ducks that are awry. No, for sure. I think it's sad that this is how we are programmed to be. That what we do is more important than who we are, and I totally get why that would be a sticking point, for sure. Often when we think of relationships, we think of safety and stability first. And these align with our basic human needs, right? The Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's not uncommon to associate these needs with money in the modern age. It is how capitalist systems are designed. So I can, I can see how those things can be connected in your mind and when you're considering relationships. I think that, coupled with the potential lack of resources, this can get in the way of relationships. And I think that's what's happening for this person. I think it's important to consider what else you're able to contribute. First to yourself, your well-being, and then to others. Like, what other needs are there? Some would even categorize these to be higher on the ranking of needs, are things like being heard and being seen, being accepted, being comforted, being held, connected, being intellectual or emotionally supported. These are all human needs that a lot of people would potentially put above their financial needs. So consider if you can show up with those attributes to yourself and your relationship. And then instead of shutting down to all relationships, consider being honest with those that you date. You can say things like, I'm figuring out my career right now, so I'm not financially stable. Or if you don't want to have a conversation like that, you can signal and set a tone of sharing finances up front. So you can split the drink, split the dinner. So start as you mean to carry on. Don't put yourself in the situation of being a provider if you're not in a position to be a provider yet.
Yes.
So you can just set that tone right up front. Take the pressure off, you know. Shame about money is very real. Shame about careers where you should be, all the shoulds, all the shoulding around is real. Shame is real. Courage is the only way through shame, unfortunately. So I think just be courageous. Just, you know, put yourself out there. Be honest. Find a way to communicate where you're at. Allow people to meet you where they're at rather than where you want to be.
Yeah.
And then give yourself lots of encouragement and compassion and grow.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know that my feed is skewed, if you will. My particular algorithm, my life algorithm is set to, because I do a lot of career coaching. So there's so many people who are questioning their careers and trying to find out what they want to do in life and aligning their passions and their finances and their skill sets. And so I share that just to say you are not alone. Likely you will say to the person across the Zoom or dinner table, you know, I'm still trying to figure out my career. And they'll be like, me too.
Yeah.
Particularly in the midst of COVID now. There's so many people so many new clients that I have who are reassessing what they want to do with their time and their passion and their careers and their energy and their effort and their skill set. And so, yeah, I don't know if I would put a hold on meeting new people until you find the right fit, because that's going to continue to evolve. And certainly if you feel like you want to invest more time right now in your self-exploration, then spend that time there versus exploring partnership.
Yeah, for sure. The career thing is very real. People often tell me how lucky I am to have my passion and paycheck aligned. And yes, I feel very lucky. Then I have to remind them, like, it came at a cost. I took a massive pay cut.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, I have my passion and my paycheck aligned, but at a cost. And it's just it's a sacrifice that you make.
Yes.
It's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be easy. It's an ongoing struggle, I think, for people.
Yes.
Something's got to give, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You can't put things on hold for everything else to sort of sort themselves out, because life happens. You kind of have to allow people to meet you where you're at.
Yeah. And frankly, I've changed jobs probably 4 times since being married. So
yeah, right. Exactly.
So it's going to continue to happen anyway.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Our final question also came by email.
So here's the question. You've probably dealt with this 100 times, but it feels perennial. A partner declares that they're polyamorous, but with other partners, they seem to be focused on their physical intimacy and not on broader, deeper push of love. How do you shift the tide? How do you enjoy the whole package? And what do you do when a person feels like they're the provider of comfort rather than the hot item?
Good question. Good question. What I'm hearing from this is somebody who is enjoying polyamory, and what attracting to them to polyamory is what polyamory stands for, which is many loves, right? They sounds like what they're kind of looking for other polyamorous people to be in partnership, to have intimacy, to have deeper connections and love. And I think they might be bumping into people who are more on the open relationship side of the non-monogamous world, where they're more really interested in sexual explorations. And just to say, these are very rough and arbitrary definitions. I only use these categories just to remind people that not everybody who's non-monogamous is the same. So if it sounds like this person does identify as polyamorous and is reaching out to people who they think is polyamorous, but maybe they may be bumping into people who are in open relationships, and what they're really after is sexual exploration. And it sounds like the reason why they are in an open relationship is because they're interested in variety and newness and fun, hot dates. So to me, that really just feels like a misalignment in dating. I think when you're dating, it's just important to be clear about what's available on your side and kind of state your needs and desires from a relationship. So if you are connecting with somebody who are saying they're polyamorous, ask them, like we said before, tell me more, and ask them what it means to be poly for them. what does it look like, why they're choosing poly, and see if it really aligns with what you want out of a relationship.
And even what they may be looking for. I think that there's also a distinction between someone identifying as polyamorous and what they may be looking for from a current connection. So if they are in a relationship, for example, that may be demi or asexual, and they're looking and they are polyamorous, but right now the scratch, the itch that needs to be scratched is sexual connection. It may be the right person in the wrong time for them in terms of the type of connection they're looking for. So I think your advice around tell me more is the anecdote to assuming that we're on the same page, only to realize that we want something different.
Right. And I think just to put out there what you're looking for, if you're looking for a more of a full-on intimate, connected, loving, long-term relationship, I think you just need to put that out there and see who else is available for that, right? And I think connecting with people who actually just want to have a sexual exploration and hoping that they will change or grow into something more, I think that's just going to get frustrating over time. I think just putting out there what you need and hoping that you'll connect with people who align with that it's going to be easier to manage than kind of picking people who don't want to be there.
Yeah. I remember we talked something similar to this in a previous episode about how sometimes people won't share out all of what they want in the beginning because they're like, I don't want to scare somebody off. Right. And we're like, no, scare them off. Like that's the that's the point. If you're like, if in the first 5 dates you don't talk about how you want children in your life and that's something that's really important to you because you don't want to scare the person off by talking about it too soon, you may be developing feelings and connections with someone who does not want children. And so it is actually better to just name all the things up front. Apps make that really easy. Just if you're using some sort of dating app, write all the things.
Write it down
on there. Not that people will read it. There's so many times people swipe and just see the picture. But at least, frankly, working on things like apps help you get clear with the language. I
agree with you.
Help you develop what the language is for yourself. Whether or not someone reads it, you begin to name what it is that's important for you.
Yeah. I think it's Steve Dean who keeps his OkCupid profile as like a blog. Yeah. He just like writes updates for his profile all the time. I think that's a fun idea, you know. I think it's worth just like revisiting your profiles every now and then and rewriting and see if it still aligns with you. And I would say on that note, I read somewhere, I'm going to dig this up and talk about this more. I love the idea, which they were suggesting. The suggestion was not to match the other person's energy, but to remain in your energy and see if the energies align. I think a lot of the time, especially in dating situations, we find ourselves matching the other person's energy. So we kind of, or at least some people have a tendency to match the other person's energy rather than remain in their own energy and see if the energies align. And I think that, and I want to dig into that idea more and explore it in another episode. But I think this is one of those situations. If you're like going out there dating people and you're kind of going along with what they want, and actually in the background you're like, actually that's not what I want at all. It's just like stay in what you want, stay in your desire, and see if things align rather than trying to fit yourself into the other person's desires.
Yeah, I like it.
And if you would like us to answer your questions on a future episode, you can share a question with us by taking a voice memo on your phone and emailing to us at listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com. That's listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com. Or you can record a question for the show by calling 201-870-0063. That is 201-870-0063. This number is on the show notes, by the way.
That's right. You can like and share this podcast and review it so that other folks can get connected to the Curious Fox community, and join us on Patreon. Become a supporter of the Curious Fox community. You can access exclusive events. You get podcast extras. You get Ask Me Anythings with Effy Blue. You get to ask our podcast guest questions and so much more. So go on to Patreon. We are Curious Foxes, and find us there.
This episode is produced and edited by the warm and thoughtful Nina Pollock. Our intro music is composed by Dave Saha. We are grateful for their work, and we're grateful to you for listening. As always, stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.